Salt burned the wound, but not as much as the memory. He was kneeling in the sand, blood on his hands, sea foam licking the edges of his boots. The cannon smoke hadn't cleared yet, but the silence after the screams was worse. In his fist, a gold coin, still warm, still whispering. They told him the island was cursed. They never said why. His name was Elias Crowe, quartermaster to Captain Blackbeard, and he broke the one oath no pirate should ever break. He left a man behind. Now, years later, every time the waves crash against the hull, Elias hears that man's voice, calling from beneath the tide. The gold was cursed, yes, but it was my name they screamed in the dark. This is not just a tale of treasure. This is a story of guilt buried deeper than the chest, of shadows that follow even in daylight, of a crew that vanished one by one, and a secret no man should carry alone. And still, he asks himself every night, if the sea forgives no one, why do we keep going back? These are pirate stories, the kind they don't tell in taverns. Welcome to the channel, The Pirate's Diary. If tales of pirates, lost oaths, and cursed gold stir something in you, the sea keeps its stories, but only for those who dare to remember. Will you join the crew? Subscribe and step aboard. The lantern swung slowly above Elias's head, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts across the rotting beams of the ship's hold. Sweat clung to his neck. His fists were raw, not from battle, but from trying to hold back everything he couldn't say. She sat on the floor, back against the crates. Her dress was torn, salt-stained, and soaked with blood that was not her own. Her wrists bore the memory of chains, thin scars like whispers across her skin, but her voice, when it came, was steady, strong. His name was Milo, she said. He didn't run. He stood at the gate so we could get away. The bullets didn't stop him, not until the children were safe. Elias didn't speak. Couldn't. He stared at her like she was a dream dredged up from the ocean floor, beautiful, broken, and soaked in things he didn't want to believe. His brother, his blood, dead for strangers. Where? His voice cracked like old wood. She looked up at him, eyes wide in the flickering light. A place they call Red Hollow, south of Tortuga, a stone mouth that eats the young. They take them in chains, sell them to captains who pay in silver and silence. The ship creaked. The sea whispered just beyond the hull. But in Elias's chest, all he could hear was the echo of a name, Milo. He remembered the boy who used to sing to the seagulls, the one who never stepped on a spider, who cried at the sight of starving men. Elias had left that boy behind a long time ago, traded him for gold, for fear, for the favor of Blackbeard himself. But now he saw that face again. In every corner of this cursed hold, in the woman's silent tears, in the weight pressing down on his chest. He died for mercy, Elias muttered. Half to her, half to the shadows. And I've killed for everything but. He turned away, knuckles white around the hilt of his blade. The ship rocked gently, but the storm in him was just beginning. What kind of man follows Blackbeard into hell, but turns his back on a brother who begged him once, just once, not to become like the others? The world needs monsters, Blackbeard had told him once, staring into the fire. Better they fear you than pity you. But Milo had never wanted fear. He had wanted something softer, something Elias couldn't name without shame burning his throat. He pressed a hand to the wood. It was damp, old, and it smelled of mold and blood and salt, like every promise that had ever rotted in this world. I'm going to Red Hollow, he whispered, and I'm not going to leave it standing. The woman's eyes followed him as he climbed the ladder. She said nothing, but the silence said everything. Outside, the moon bled silver across the waves. The crew moved like shadows across the deck, unaware that a reckoning was crawling up from the deep. Elias had sailed for vengeance, for coin, for glory under Blackbeard's flag. But now he sailed for something far more dangerous: remorse. He didn't know if Milo's soul would forgive him. He didn't know if the children made it past the jungle or if Red Hollow even still breathed. But he knew this: mercy has a price, and I've got blood to pay. The sea, as always, offered no answers, only a question. What are you willing to become to undo what you've done? And somewhere in the dark of the sails, a voice seemed to whisper, calm, cruel, and familiar. The dead don't speak, brother, but they remember. The brig stank of rust, damp wood, and old screams. Chains clinked in the dark like whispers. Elias crouched beside her, hand trembling, as he set a crust of bread down near her bruised fingers. Inaya didn't speak. She only looked at him, not with thanks, but with a warning in her eyes. He had locked her behind iron, not to punish her, but to protect her, from the crew, from the truth, from the weight of what she carried. They can't know, he whispered, not yet. But the sea has no patience for secrets, and silence on a pirate ship is a louder scream than any storm. That night a shadow came for Elias. He was sharpening his dagger in the lower deck when the door creaked open. A voice, deep and dry like gunpowder. Captain wants a word. No title, no name, just the summons. That alone was enough to chill a man's spine. Blackbeard's cabin burned in candlelight. The smell of tobacco and salt filled the air, thick enough to chew. The old pirate sat behind his desk, rolling a flintlock pistol between his fingers like a prayer turned into a threat. "You're hiding something," he said. Not a question, a blade in sentence form. Elias stood rigid, sweat rising on the back of his neck. "A woman," he said, his voice low. "She brought news of Milo." At that name, Blackbeard stopped. The pistol went still, his eyes, dark as shipwreck wood, cut through the air like broken glass. "Milo's dead." Elias hesitated. "She says otherwise." The room dropped into silence. Only the candle flame moved, flickering like it too wanted to run. Blackbeard leaned forward. His fingers brushed the edge of a scorched parchment on the table. "If she spoke of Red Hollow," he growled, "you're swimming towards something that don't float." He slid the map across the desk. Elias caught it before it fell. The paper, warm and stained, singed at the corners like it had already tried to burn itself out of existence. There was no title. Only markings that curled like scars across the skin of the sea. Blackbeard's voice lowered. "Go, if you must. But hear me, boy. Not all ghosts walk. Some wait and some don't want to be found." Elias looked down at the map. There it was, carved in faded ink. Red Hollow, a place spoken of only in warnings. A wound in the sea no ship should reopen. He turned to leave, but Blackbeard's words followed him like chains. "The dead may sleep, Elias, but it's the living who bleed when they wake." As the door closed behind him, the candle sputtered, and for a moment, the shadows in the cabin shifted. As if something unseen had been listening all along, below deck Inaya stirred in the dark, her breath shallow. Somewhere, deep in the bowels of the ship, the brig door creaked, but no one had touched it. The sky bled purple as the scorned lady slipped from Tortugas Bay, sails tight, crew silent, and dread hanging thick in the wind. The sea stretched out like a graveyard, dark and endless. In the hold, beneath barrels of rum and crates of gunpowder, Inaya lay curled against the cold. Her cough came wet and sharp, each breath like tearing cloth. Blood stained the linen Elias had wrapped around her ribs, too much blood for a body so thin, but her fingers never let go of that compass, a twisted thing of bone and black shell, bound together by strands of copper and sinew. It pulsed faintly in the candlelight, as if it still remembered pain. Inaya said the children Milo had saved made it, with their hands, their fear, their final prayers, a compass that didn't point north, but toward the place where the worst things hide, toward Red Hollow. The storms came without warning, sky screaming, waves crashing like fists. Twice, shadowed ships appeared on the horizon, sails black, flags unknown. Both times they turned back before reaching them. Some said luck, others whispered darker things. Whispers became murmurs, murmurs became fear. They watched Inaya from the corners of their eyes. This woman with sea-colored irises and a necklace of bones, each one pale as moonlight and carved with markings no one dared read. She brought the storm, someone muttered below deck. She speaks to ghosts. Elias heard them, heard it all, but he didn't flinch. Let them fear her. Let them fear him. He wasn't sailing for peace. He wasn't chasing treasure. He was chasing a wound in the world, and Inaya was the only one who could show him where it still bled. Late one night, as lightning traced the horizon and the hull groaned like it was trying to remember the shore, Inaya sat up in the shadows. Her voice was a breath, barely alive. "You want vengeance, Elias," she said, "but your brother wanted justice." Her eyes found his in the dark, not angry, not kind, just tired. "Do you know the difference?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because, deep down, he knew justice dies clean. Vengeance, it rots. He gripped the edge of the table, breath shallow. He remembered Milo's laugh, soft, harmless, and how he used to dream of building homes along the coast, not stealing them. Elias had chosen the blade, Milo had chosen the children. The compass turned again, clicking softly, like bones tapping against a coffin. They were getting closer, to Red Hollow, to the truth, to whatever waited beneath that cursed name, and somewhere behind. Them as the scorned lady sliced through the water, the sea seemed to whisper things not meant for men, things about mercy and the price of looking back. The fog clung to the cliffs like a curse, heavy, greedy, refusing to lift even as the sun tried to rise. The scorned lady drifted into a dead tide, her sails whispering against the stillness, the crew holding their breath like the sea might swallow them whole for looking. Red Hollow rose from the rocks like it had always been there. A fortress carved into the bones of the coast. Its walls were pitted and blackened by time and fire, its cannons aimed not at the sea, but inward. From the cliff's edge, Elias peered down, his knuckles white on the scope. Children, dozens of them, barefoot, shirtless, dragging crates as heavy as their bodies, chains on ankles, silence on lips. The only sounds were gulls and the crack of the lash. It was worse than Inaya said. They weren't just being sold, they were being broken, branded with fire, trained like dogs, prepared to crew ships owned by men who wore powdered wigs by day and pirate flags by night. Spanish gold paid for it all, and English silence kept it going. Elias swallowed back bile, his breath shallow. He knew that face, the overseer with the red sash and whip, a man once seen drinking with crown officers in Port Royal. He remembered the smile, the laughter, the gold tooth, and then he saw it, a beam, half-rotted, marked in charcoal, Milo, his name scrawled crooked and desperate next to others, boys and girls now long gone, forgotten. Elias staggered back, fist to his chest like something had pierced it. He remembered Milo's hands, small, always reaching for someone else's. He remembered how he'd cried when they pulled a drowning boy from the surf, and how he'd whispered, "We can't just leave them." And there, below, a boy flinched as the whip cracked over his back. Elias blinked. Milo's face stared back at him. Same eyes, same curl of hair, same quiet, fear. The past surged through him like fire in the lungs. His heart beat like war drums. He saw himself, years ago, turning away, following Blackbeard, choosing steel over soul. He had told himself Milo was naive, that mercy had no place on the sea, but now he saw what mercy could have saved. They made soldiers out of orphans, he whispered, voice cracked, and I helped build the world that let them. Behind him, Inaya limped forward, pale and shaking. Do you see now? She asked. Do you see what he died for? Elias didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that moment he wasn't a pirate, he wasn't a killer. He was just a brother, standing at the edge of a wound he helped carve into the world. And deep inside, something broke, not with a scream, but with silence. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. The barrels smelled of molasses and old lies. Elias tightened the sash around his waist, stained with fake merchant colors, while outside the moon rose like a blade. Above the sea, they'd arrived just before the guard shift, posing as rum traders delivering a bribe. Inaya had memorized the timing. Elias had memorized the guards' faces. The crew whispered doubts, but no one dared voice them. Still, he felt it. The itch behind the neck. The silence too thick, the kind of stillness that only comes before a trap. And it had a name. Kerrick. A sailor with gold in his eyes and rot in his soul. He'd served under Blackbeard once, but his loyalty could be bought like grog in a brothel. Fear and greed had wrapped themselves around his heart, and now it beat for coin. Elias didn't see it coming, not until he heard the click. Not until the barrels were ripped open. Not until the torches lit the courtyard in fire red. Steel clashed. The guards moved fast. Too fast. Betrayal always cuts cleaner than a blade. They dragged Elias through the gates, chains biting into his wrists, boots slipping on stones slick with ocean spray and blood. The scent of smoke clung to everything. They beat Inaya until she could barely lift her head. Her necklace of bones shattered across the floor, fragments scattering like lost teeth. A voice slithered from the dark. One of the guards, eyes yellowed, smile crooked. That boy you're mourning, Milo? He laughed. He died screaming, throat crushed trying to save a brat who pissed himself. The world stopped. Elias didn't breathe, didn't blink. Something inside him, something long held down, rose like a tide. Snap. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a roar. It was a sound deeper than words, the moment when grief becomes rage and love turns into a weapon. The chains fell. The man didn't even have time to gasp. Elias moved like the storm he had held inside for years. Elbow cracked bone, boot crushed throat. Steel found its way into hands that no longer trembled. He wasn't thinking. He was memory. He was every scar Milo bore. He was the fire. The courtyard erupted. Children screamed. Guards scattered. Flames kissed the wooden beams, spreading through the fortress like vengeance with wings. Inaya crawled toward him, coughing blood, reaching not for safety, but for the compass. They still live, she whispered. Save them, or Milo died for nothing. Elias looked at her, then at the door. Smoke poured through the cracks. Somewhere behind it a child cried. He picked up a fallen sword. His hands were bloodied. His face was ash. And in that moment, he wasn't following Blackbeard anymore. He was following Milo, straight into the fire. The cellar was stone and sweat and rot. No light, no breeze, just the stench of old blood and men who'd screamed too long. Elias lay twisted in the dark, wrists bound behind him, mouth dry with dust and rage. The guard had left laughing, the same one who spat on Milo's name. He shouldn't have. Elias leaned hard against the post, jaw clenched. Pain lit up his hand like fire, a sharp crack, a burst of white, thumb out of socket. He didn't scream, he just breathed through. It pulled his wrist free and reached for the rusted nail he'd spotted hours ago. The ropes gave way with a sound like old flesh tearing. The guard didn't hear him coming, didn't even turn. The knife was quick, quiet. And when it kissed the man's throat, Elias didn't blink. He leaned in close, whispering just one word. Milo. Blood pooled at his boots. He stepped over it. In the corner of the cellar, Inaya was crumpled, her breath thin and rattling. One eye swollen shut, the other locked onto him. "We either burn this place," Elias murmured, slicing her ropes, "or we rot here." She nodded once. That was enough. They staggered up the service tunnel, a forgotten shaft behind the storage room. The air grew warmer, thicker. The scent of gunpowder and oil hung in the shadows. Elias grabbed 2 lanterns. Inaya pulled down a rack of dry cloth. They lit the room like it was a prayer. The fire took fast. Wood crackled. Smoke rushed through the hallways like a ghost that had waited too long. Guards shouted. Bells rang. But the flames danced louder. Through the smoke they found the cages, rusted iron, children too small to break them, 9 in all. Faces hollow, eyes too old. Inaya fumbled with the keys. Elias swung the blade. One by one the locks gave. One by one the children emerged, blinking into the nightmare. One boy, barefoot, eyes bright with smoke and memory, stepped forward. He clutched something in his hand, a scrap of cloth, a piece of a torn map. "Milo told us to wait," he whispered. "He said his brother would come." Elias staggered. It hit harder than any blow. The blade slipped from his hand. His breath caught in his chest. He dropped to his knees as the firelight danced across the boy's face. He had Milo's eyes. And somehow, in this cursed place, his brother had kept his word. Elias wept, not for the first time, but for the first time, clean. Inaya placed a hand on his shoulder. No words, no need. The fire roared behind them. The sea called ahead. They would run. They would fight. They would burn every fortress like this from the inside out. But in that moment, with the boy's hand in his, Elias knew this wasn't vengeance anymore. This was a promise kept. The sea was quiet that night. Too quiet. No gulls, no wind. Just the creak of the scorned lady drifting through the fog and the weight of things that couldn't be undone. Elias sat beneath the lantern in his quarters, the journal heavy in his hands. Inaya had found it hidden behind a loose stone in the fortress wall, wrapped in cloth, pressed flat, nearly forgotten. Milo's handwriting was crooked, soft, like he'd written while trying not to wake someone sleeping. Each page was pain, and each page was light. Drawings of small hands, notes of laughter, words written phonetically, meant to comfort the frightened. Lullabies passed from child to child, names of the lost scribbled in the margins, like he couldn't bear to let them disappear. Elias turned the pages with shaking fingers. A sketch of a boy with a chipped tooth and a proud stance. A song written in 3 languages. And this line, "If I don't come back, tell Elias I waited." The journal fell to his lap. He didn't move, didn't speak. All the years, all the choices, all the silence. And here, in a child's scrawl, was a love that never blamed him. The fire inside Elias didn't burn anymore. It ached. That night, he knocked once on the captain's door. Blackbeard opened it with a grunt, pipe smoke curling around his face. Like a halo of ash, his eyes flicked down to the journal, then back to Elias. He said nothing, just stepped aside. The cabin was dim, smelling of salt and tobacco. A map lay sprawled across the desk, pins stuck in ports Elias could never pronounce. Elias placed the journal down, said nothing. Blackbeard sat, opened the cover. His eyes moved slowly, line by line, page by page. His face didn't change. He never looked up. And when he finished, he reached for the lantern, held the flame low, and dropped the journal in. It caught fast, crackled, curled into ash. Elias stared. His fists clenched, but he didn't stop him. He couldn't. Blackbeard watched the flames, then spoke. No truth survives long at sea. He took a long drag from his pipe. The pages blackened, the ink bled. But let the fire carry it. The room filled with smoke, with silence, with everything neither of them could say. And when Elias stepped back into the night, the stars were gone. The sea below as dark as the sky above. But in his chest something steady remained. Not rage, not grief, just a name and a promise not yet finished. The wind was soft the morning they reached Port Charles. Not a storm in sight, just the sound of waves brushing the docks and the smell of fish, old wood and distant gunpowder. 9 children stood quietly on the deck of the scorned lady, eyes wide, clothes torn, hands clutching splinters of hope. They didn't speak much. They had spoken enough in screams back in Red Hollow. Waiting on shore was a woman with silver in her hair and a blade hidden in her boot. A widow, sharp-eyed and calm, with a past tied to Blackbeard's ledger and debts she never forgot. Elias watched as the children stepped down, one by one. The last to leave was a girl, no older than 8, her skin sun-kissed, curls tangled by sea air, and her eyes, his brother's eyes. She didn't ask permission. She just walked up and wrapped her arms around Elias's coat, face buried against his chest. Her voice was soft. "Are you my uncle?" Elias froze. The wind held its breath. He knelt beside her, heart aching like a cracked mast. "No," he whispered, "but I'll bleed like one." She smiled, not because she believed it, but because she needed it. And he did too. Inaya stood by the gangplank, arms crossed, bruises still dark on her skin. Blackbeard had sent a pouch of gold. She didn't even touch it. "I didn't survive to get rich," she said, watching the children disappear into the town. "I survived to remember," Elias nodded. He understood now. That night, after the deck fell quiet and the crew sank into drink and dice, Elias climbed to the quarterdeck. Blackbeard was there, coat draped over one shoulder, pipe glowing like a distant star. For a moment they said nothing. The sea moved slow beneath them. Then Elias spoke. "Was it worth it?" His voice barely rose above the tide. "All this, the fire, the blood. Was vengeance ever worth it?" Blackbeard didn't turn. He let the smoke curl into the dark before answering. "Vengeance feeds hunger." A pause. "Justice ends it." Another pause, longer. "But neither brings sleep." Elias leaned on the railing, staring into the black water. He didn't need more words. He just needed the silence between them. There would be no songs sung of this voyage, no bounty claimed, no graves marked with glory, only names burned into memory and wounds that would never find a map home. But somewhere in Port Charles, a girl now slept without chains. And maybe that was enough. A single lantern flickered on the stern of the scorned lady, its light trembling against the fog like a dying star. Far off, barely more than a shadow in the sea, a ship burned. No sails, no flags, just fire and memory drifting into the black. Elias stood alone on the deck, the cold biting through his coat, the salt wind scraping at his skin like a blade that never stopped cutting. He didn't speak, didn't move. The flames on the horizon danced quietly, a pyre without a name, without mourners. Below deck the crew played dice, laughed, lived, but above them Elias carved. He carved small things, rough figures of children, birds and ships with sails far too large. Some he left on shore near fishing villages. Others he tied to driftwood and let the sea carry them. He never explained why, and he never wore Milo's necklace. It hung near his bunk, untouched, its small bone charm faded by time and memory. Too sacred to wear, too heavy to forget. He didn't speak of red, hollow, not to the crew, not to Inaya, who had vanished one night, leaving only a single phrase etched in the wood beside her hammock. The sea remembers, so will I. He didn't need to speak of it, because it lived inside him now, not as a memory, but as marrow. One fog-heavy evening, as the ship rocked slow and low, Blackbeard took the helm. The old pirate didn't ask where they were headed. He never did. He only smoked, eyes locked on the dark ahead like it owed him something. After a long silence, he turned. "What haunts you now, Elias?" But Elias said nothing, just watched the water ripple below. Because how do you answer that? How do you speak of a boy whose name is etched in every scream you still hear? How do you explain the echo? Not the one the sea makes, but the one you carry. The echo of things you didn't do, people you didn't save, truths you didn't tell in time. Some scars speak loudest in silence, and some brothers are never truly buried. They wait, in waves, in lullabies, in dreams that end in screams. Blackbeard didn't press him, he just nodded, slow, as if he too had once stared into the dark and seen something stare back. "Some ghosts belong to the deep," he muttered, "but the worst ones, they walk beside you." Elias returned to the railing, hands tight, eyes red. The sea stretched out before them, wide, endless, empty, and yet not. He knew now that treasure wasn't always gold, that vengeance doesn't heal, that names, once lost, take something with them. And somewhere beneath all of that, he still heard Milo's voice, not in words, not in blame, just in the stillness between waves, a breath, a memory, a brother. "The sea doesn't forget," Elias once whispered to a child they rescued. "It buries, but it doesn't forget." And it was true. No matter how far they sailed, the scorned lady carried more than crew. It carried truths hidden in wood and salt and silence, things no map could lead to, things no wind could blow away. Some say Blackbeard's ghost still sails these waters, not for gold, but for what he couldn't save, and maybe that's what they all were now, shadows tied to a story too heavy to end. Did you already know this forgotten part of the story? If you had been on that ship, would you have set fire to the fortress or walked away? What other sea stories deserve to be told here before they vanish like smoke on the tide? If this story touched you in any way, don't let it vanish like so many other names the sea has taken. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep hearing what was never meant to be forgotten. This has been a page from the Pirate's Diary, not meant to be read, but now it's yours.